Welcome to CEDA's live stream discussion on AI for Business, the State of Play. I'm Melinda Cilento, the CEO of CEDA, the Committee for Economic Development of Australia, and I'm really pleased that you can join us for what I'm sure is going to be a really interesting discussion on a very important topic. I'm pleased to be joined for today's discussion by Professor Mark Girolami, the Chief Scientist of the Alan Turing Institute in the UK, and Stela, who's the director of the CSIRO's National Artificial Intelligence Centre here in Australia. Before we get started, though, I would like to just begin by acknowledging that I'm joining this discussion from Naarm, otherwise known as Melbourne, and the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to elders and thank them for sharing tradition, culture, and history with all of us in the spirit of reconciliation. Now to our topic at hand, artificial intelligence. Obviously, artificial intelligence, or AI, has the potential to unlock hugely transformative benefits and opportunities in terms of economic, social, and environmental outcomes here in Australia and around the world. There's certainly a lot of interest in the topic, and we couldn't ask for two better people to help us unpack some of the important issues around AI today. Mark, perhaps first to you. I think the audience would be really interested in understanding just a little bit about the Alan Turing Institute and how you see the Institute and your role as Chief Scientist in steering AI in the UK.
Yeah, great to be here. So the Alan Turing Institute was established in 2015 as the UK's National Institute for, at the time, data science and algorithms. This was the age of algorithms. And then subsequently, after a government report on the potential for AI, the Turing Institute took on the mission of being the National Institute for both data science and AI. And given that the renaissance that we're seeing in AI and the massive opportunities that we're seeing in AI is largely driven by data. Of course, it's also driven by new computing paradigms and the availability of compute. It puts the Alan Turing Institute in a very strong position by its focus on both data science and AI. And I have been involved with the Alan Turing Institute right from the very start. And just last year, I was appointed as the first chief scientist of the Institute. And one of the roles, one of the jobs that I currently have is developing a science and innovation strategy for the National Institute.
So Stella, perhaps just a quick introduction from you as well. The National Artificial Intelligence Centre at CSIRO is relatively new. It's probably be interesting for the audience just to hear a little bit about what the centre is doing and its role in driving an AI vision here in Australia.
Thanks, Melinda. So the National Artificial Intelligence Centre is federally funded as part of Australia's AI Action Plan. And there are two key things which really inspired our mission. One is that we have incredible pockets of capability across Australia, but it's fragmented and relatively unknown across industry and community. And the second thing is that we're at this incredible point in time where AI is transforming the world around us, and we want to ensure that it is transforming the world with responsibility, inclusion, and ethics front and center. And so this has carved the mission that we have around activating Australia's AI capability to create responsible and inclusive opportunities for every person, every business in the country. And so when it comes to the person, we're really thinking about making the skilling opportunities more available for people across Australia. We're also looking at broad community understanding across Australia. When it comes to business, it's about creating those trusted and practical paths to AI adoption along responsible AI, along diversity and inclusion, and along AI at scale. And then when it comes to country, it's really about amplifying the great ecosystem that we have, as well as coordinating the ecosystem to build a national advantage around responsible and inclusive AI.
Well, thanks, Stella. I'm going to come back and ask you to give us a little bit more detail or insight, if you like, on where you're seeing the state of AI in Australia. I think you sort of talked a little bit about it being a bit unknown, but Mark, I'm really interested in where you see the state of play in AI in the UK, and including in particular in the business sector. You know, the maturity of adoption, and you know how you're seeing the realization of benefits and the utilization of AI.
Well, it's quite interesting that in the UK, if we think of the academic or the research setting, then we are world leading in a number of areas. We've got very strong research, very strong academic institutions in the component or constituent fields of AI. Now, in certain areas of the economy, particularly in the services sector and amongst large companies, there is a strong adoption of AI technology and an understanding that it unlocks the key to business competitiveness. However, this isn't really uniform, not by any means at all, and there are clearly a number of challenges that we face as a nation. So whilst we're strong at research in AI, there's a clear recognition that scaling the associated innovation, up to business success is a real weak point within the UK. And it's actually something that our Chief Government Scientific Advisor, Sir Patrick Vallance, has emphasised. And so at the Alan Turing Institute, coherent research and innovation is going to be our key emphasis to try and address this particular issue as we move forwards to what we are calling Turing 2.0. The other thing, of course, is that there's a large pool of AI talent, yet we face a shortage of people with the sophisticated technological skills that are currently in high demand and are going to be in high demand from the business and the industrial sectors. Now, when it comes to government in the UK, last year, 2021, we saw the launch of the UK government's first national AI strategy. And one of the three main aims it has is to support the transition to an AI-enabled economy that's going to benefit all sectors and all regions of the UK. So it's clear the UK government sees AI and its diffusion and adoption across business is absolutely critical to productivity of the entire economy, and it's, at least in its intention, set on broad uptake.
Stella, I think there's probably some similarities there, or some common themes, perhaps, in terms of how we're seeing things in Australia. I mean, in terms of perhaps mixed uptake and adoption at this stage, with concentration in certain sectors and maybe in larger businesses. Also, the real question around capability. So, how what's your perspective? Feet under the desk for a little bit now about how where we're at with AI in Australia.
There are definitely a lot of similarities. In fact, I want to really lean into the fact that no one globally has worked out the AI opportunity. We're all in this, navigating it together. In Australia, I would really define it as high contrasts and big opportunities. That's how I would talk about the state of AI in Australia. I'll give you some examples. So we're ranked very high on research, in fact, 5th in the world, which is tremendous for a country of our size. But we're ranked low on business adoption. And here is a shock statistic. The Australian Bureau of Statistics in 2020 surveyed 7,000 Australian businesses, and only 2% said that they were using AI. That is shocking. Now, here's another one. We have very high specialization in pockets around Australia, such as responsible AI, computer vision, remote operations, robotics, quantum AI. However, we are ranked below global average when it comes to community understanding. And so you really start to see this high contrast area. Now, at the core of our AI conversation is that it's not about AI for technology's sake, it's about the outcomes that AI is creating for business and communities. And we know that business leaders across Australia, they are realizing, in fact, over 80% realize that AI will transform their business and their industry. And to echo Mark's point, we know that PwC conducted extensive studies to find that companies who are using AI are actually seeing better outcomes. They're seeing higher customer experience, they're seeing faster innovation, they're seeing faster decision-making, effective operations, and so on. And so AI adoption actually becomes a leading indicator to business competitiveness on a global stage. And that's why the AI adoption is so important to us. And because we have such deep specialized capability already, it becomes a very ripe opportunity ready for Australia's business.
So Stela, you talked about community, you talked about the fact that AI isn't just AI for technology's sake, it is about the outcomes and the opportunities that it creates. Obviously, when you're thinking about community understanding, but also community trust is important. I'm interested in both of your perspectives on how important that trust piece is and why that is, and how much of a focus do you think it is at the moment in terms of the way in which businesses and other organisations are adopting AI. And perhaps, Mark, we'll start with you and then over to you, Stela.
Well, it's quite interesting. I mean, if I think of the figures for the UK, they broadly match what Stela has been talking about. So the take-up of AI, certainly from the Global AI Adoption Index, which was published by IBM, shows that about 49% of British businesses that were surveyed are not using AI systems and have no plans to do so in the future. And this is the highest figure of lack of adoption for any European country. So it'd be right to say that our take-up is siloed. On the government side, there's several public sector organisations that are already successfully adopting and using AI for tasks ranging from fraud detection to answering customer queries. But the full potential has only just really just begun to be exploited. And I think that the other point that has been raised is it's worth noting that the potential uses for AI, certainly in the public sector, are significant, but they really need to be balanced with the ethical, fairness and safety considerations. And this is an area of focus for the Alan Turing Institute. Our public policy programme has already been instrumental in providing first of its kind guidance on using AI by the public sector, and we're set to update this guidance as part of the national AI strategy.
Stela, thoughts on trust in Australia and adoption of AI?
Yeah, and one thing to share in particular is there is a unique scenario in Australia when it comes to trust. Both the COLA reports as well as Gradient Institute reports highlight that Australians have a higher benchmark for trust. And in fact, what we've heard during the listening tour, as we're going city to city, is that the community understanding and trust across Australia is actually slowing down business adoption of AI. In fact, we heard specific businesses whose communities and customers didn't know about AI. And so as soon as the topic AI was mentioned, it actually brought up a lot of questions and fear and lack of understanding. So there are two key things I think that are important for us to realize. One is that Australians, we have an ingrained higher benchmark of trust. And this could actually serve as our differentiator to inspire trusted technology innovation from the start. Secondly is, as we heard from the listening tour, as AI is being adopted across many more scenarios, it becomes important to win the trust of communities and customers. And communities and customers will not be reading all those terms and conditions that are tens and tens, maybe sometimes hundreds of pages long. We're hearing that leaning into the trust from a brand perspective, from a social license perspective. And the way to earn this is by establishing those governance models, ensuring standards, ensuring principles are actually practiced. By earning this social license, that is how trust across communities and customers can be nurtured.
Mark, when we talk about principles, and you talked about in the guidance that the Alan Turing Institute has put out, I'm interested to understand where you think the maturity of that is in the UK. And one of the things that we've been focusing on is that principles are important. I sort of describe, I think, 2018, 2019 as peak ethical principles, if you like, in terms of the talk about them in the media and more broadly. But of course, the rubber really hits the road when you get to implementing those principles. So interested to understand where you think that's at in the UK, and what more might be done to accelerate the adoption of the types of frameworks that drive safe, responsible and sustainable AI, and how that can be accelerated more broadly.
Yeah, I mean, AI, certainly in the UK, is being used for efficiency and productivity gains across a range of mostly service-based sectors, though it's notable that there are many sectors behind in terms of adoption, including key ones such as agriculture, construction, and transport. Now, the other areas, of course, are the health and life sciences, and these are real broad priority areas for the UK government's science and innovation agenda. And using AI in these areas is a key part of the UK's National Health Services strategy to improve care and well-being. And certainly at Turing, we've been involved in some projects aiming to improve health through AI. So we worked with the National Health Service in supporting the COVID app, and then looking at AI methods for early detection of Alzheimer's, for example.
Well, thanks, Mark. I mean, I think we could go on for hours talking about the many examples that we could draw from the UK, and Stella, I'm sure also likewise from Australia. But that's unfortunately all we have time for today. I just want to say thank you very much to Mark Girolami for joining us today, and Stella Solar. If you're interested in these topics, and particularly the broader issue of public interest technology, please jump on to the CEDA website, ceda.com.au. It's an agenda that we have a lot of interest in and are planning on doing more work on in the future. Thanks very much.